Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We'll call this meeting to order. Under item number 2, disclosure of pecuniary interest, we have none before me at this time. If at some point throughout the meeting a member feels they have a pecuniary interest, please let us know for the record. Moving on to item number 3A, item 3, deputations, petitions, and public meetings. 3A, Comrade Jim Seeley, President of the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 457, is in attendance to make a deputation to committee with regards to funding for the Veterans Dinner this year. Jim, welcome. Come forward, have a seat, please. How are you?
Not bad.
Good. Whenever you're ready, Jim, the floor is yours.
Your Worship, Deputy Mayor and Councillors, on November 11, 2018, it is the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. In honor of those who sacrificed their lives, the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 457 in Stayner would like to host a Veterans Dinner at the Rexplex in Wasaga Beach on Sunday, November the 11th. The branch hopes that the municipalities of Wasaga Beach and Clearview would join them to make this dinner a special event. The social hour would start at 6 p.m. and the dinner would commence at 7. We are asking each of the municipalities of Wasaga Beach and Clearview would help in sharing the cost of the special event by splitting the cost 3 ways. The estimated cost of a roast beef dinner for 200 people, including free meals for all veterans and their spouse or a caregiver, and the hall rental fee is $6,000. It's $25 a plate times 200 people is $5,000. We weren't sure about how much it would cost to rent the Rexplex, and advertising and posters we figured would be about $1,000, bringing the cost to $6,000 plus the rent of the Rexplex. The Legion generally has a budget of $1,500 for this event, so that's why we're asking for the council's support. We have also reached out to New Lowell and Creemore Legions in hope for their participation in this event, but we haven't heard no word back from them.
Well, thanks very much, Jim. I certainly would be very supportive of this. We can never do enough for our veterans, and being the 100th anniversary, I want to commend you and your team at the Legion for the work you do for our veterans and keeping things moving in remembrance of those who sacrificed the ultimate sacrifice for our country. So thank you for being here today. Questions from Council? Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to know what amount of money they're looking for in total. Are you looking for the hall rental fee, or have we already agreed to that? I'm just wondering how much you are asking us for.
We weren't sure what the hall rental fee would be. Our budget is about $1,500. We were hoping that the hall rental fee and the rest of it could be split between the 2 communities.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you very much, Jim. Our committee will take this into consideration and we'll be back in touch. I do have a motion here. Moved by Deputy Mayor by Fulci and seconded by Councillor Smith. That committee of the whole refer Mr. Jim Seeley's request for funding for the Veterans Dinner to the Director of Finance and Treasurer to be addressed through the grant program. Questions or comments? Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. With the motion having been read, we'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor.
Deputy Mayor by Fulci?
In favor.
Councillor Bray? In favor. Councillor Eagle?
In favor.
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
In favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, unfinished business. There are 3 items there. Any questions from Council on those 3 items? Seeing none, moving on to item number 5, new business, Senior Planners Report, dated June 19, 2018. And there he is. Good afternoon, Nathan.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, and members of Council. I'll just give a brief intro on the report, and then I'm happy to take any questions or comments. So the purpose of the proposed policy amendments is really to establish a new planning framework to encourage revitalizing the entertainment district at the main beachfront, as well as creating a traditional mixed-use downtown core on our main street. The goal is a walkable, vibrant, and economically successful downtown. It really supports long-term intensification growth and investment in our downtown, which is our primary node in the long-term growth strategy that we're working on through our official plan review. It really is a three-pronged approach to implementing the downtown development master plan. One, through an official plan amendment to create policies for intensification within our primary growth node. The second is for zoning standards that promote mixed-use development and intensification around those areas. And also to create urban design guidelines that aim for high-quality design in the public realm, which is our open spaces and our streets, and also in the private realm, which is private property. And it really seeks to create a unique identity and strong sense of place within our downtown as well. So these documents all work together to follow the province's legislated direction in the growth plan for intensification and achievement of complete communities in existing serviced areas and settlement areas like Wasaga Beach. So the policy framework really identifies a number of districts such as the beach, the downtown core, the downtown gateway area, and surrounding neighborhoods that all have different characteristics. And the neighborhoods will support the downtown core and the main beachfront. We should also note that the policies that we're bringing forward work in tandem with a downtown community improvement plan that was approved by council last November, which encourages private investment in the downtown and provides incentive programs for redevelopment, including affordable and market rental housing as an example. So I'm happy to take any questions or thoughts from council about the report.
All right, questions from council? Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
Thank you. Great report. You've got lots of things jammed in here. I think parts of it are great. I think parts of it, for myself, I'd like to see further consideration. I will support it tonight to go further to council next week, but there's a couple of items that I'm waiting to hear back on before I can 100% support it. One item that does concern me is the clause in there that the ability to cut parking by 50%. I'm not sure how that number was justified. I know it spoke to on-street parking, but I know that if there's not sufficient parking in a downtown area, the downtown will fail. So my concern is that if we want residents and people to go there in the wintertime and we don't have enough parking for them, it's not going to get used and they'll go elsewhere. They're not going to be riding bikes, they're not going to be walking. So I know that we're always talking about walking and biking and those types of things, but we do live in Wasaga Beach and winters are nasty. So I think to just say that we're willing to cut it by 50% is a concern. But I'll wait till next week if there's more comments on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Sorry, do you want to respond, Nathan?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. Thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate the comment, Deputy Mayor. The one thing that we did was actually in the latest draft is fine-tune that parking exemption, and it's only for the DC1 zone, which is the very tight mixed-use corridor along Main Street between the river and Stonebridge Boulevard, I believe. So it's a very linear corridor. It's only the one zone, and so we expect that on-street parking as well as other facilities will offset that need, and it's actually an incentive for commercial uses in the downtown in that area to be able to locate in that area.
Deputy?
Thank you. And I understand the incentives when you're developing that you don't have to do as much parking. That part I understand, but if you want people to use it, it has to be convenient for them to get there. So that's my point. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Bray?
Thank you. Just a couple of comments. I know written into here is the option of expropriation, and it isn't something that I do support at any time, and I just have concerns about that. I had also noticed the parking was a concern, but thank you for the explanation. The transition zone, we talked about the compatibility from the existing houses or the existing structures to the new, and I just think it really is something we do need to be very careful with, because quite often when the site plans come to this table, we make a lot of exceptions, and I don't want the people that aren't quite in the downtown but are living right beside it to be in the shadow. I have concerns about the arena location. I know we've talked about there being multiple locations in town, and I'm just not sure if this locks it down to one. I think there's still a lot of feedback out in the community that maybe the downtown isn't the best place for the arena. So again, it's a concern. And my last comment was just that we have already identified the developer for this area. And my concern is, are we writing our OPA for the developer, or would we have done this if it was an open field and we had 10 developers competing for the business?
In response to any of that, Nathan?
Yeah, just on the last point, I think the policies are universal. We would have created them this way to create a mixed-use core and a revitalized beachfront, whether we had a partnership with FRAM or not.
Councillor Belanger?
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, the report is extremely comprehensive, and just referring to previous meetings, one of the reasons I understood that we create a CIP is to ensure that the developer builds to the town's requirement and to our preference, and that it meets what we're looking for as a community. And so that was my understanding, is certainly that we provide incentives to ensure that we are getting what we believe is best for our residents in our town, as opposed to what might be best for the developer.
Yeah, one thing that the policies also do is really create certainty for private landowners in the downtown. They know exactly what the broad range of permitted uses are, what the expectations are from a building standpoint, and then from the design standpoint also what our expectations are in terms of height, setbacks, and that sort of thing. So it really is a beneficial exercise to promote investment in our downtown.
Thank you. Councillor Smith and then Councillor Eagle.
Thank you, Worship. I appreciate all the work Nathan's put into this. I find it great. I'm excited. I want to get going. Sooner the better. I don't know why the Councillor Gray is concerned about the arena. We do know that we have a chance to get funding from both the province and the feds if we create a community hub, and I've never heard anything lately that we were not putting it down there. I think the other sites were excluded for good reasons, and I fully support this going forward.
Councillor Eagle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I thought it was a very good report, Nathan. Well done. And the only comment I had was, we had discussion before about the parking garage. Has there been any more discussion, or has that been looked into at all?
One of the steps, I think, in the implementation process will be to look at a parking strategy. The timing of that, I think, depends on a number of different factors, so that's an option that the town may need to consider at a future date. But right now we have a significant amount of surface parking at our disposal, so as we go through the implementation of the Downtown Development Master Plan, I think the working team will need to identify what's the right time to look at that as an option and go forward at that point.
Thank you.
All right, Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
Thank you. I was looking for this one spot here with regard to what Councillor Gray had said, and on page 7 it does reference other steps in the downtown implementation, and that you know, these items will each be decisions of council under separate reports and recommendations. So each of those items within that hub, be it the library, be it the arena, those all have to come back to this table, correct?
Yeah, this is one of many steps in the Downtown Development Master Planning process. It's a very important one because it creates the policy framework to move forward with. But yeah, there will be a number of other steps that have to be undertaken. The council and staff are also going through a community hub needs assessment right now. That's kind of a separate but related process. So those type of decisions would be made under separate report and cover.
All right, any other questions? Councillor Smith?
Just a comment, Your Worship, is that the Community Hub Committee, subcommittee, in my mind are looking at facilities that include an arena in some of the community hubs that we've been touring. So that's why I assume that that's where it's going to go, because of the direction of it so far has been taken by the subcommittee.
All right, any other questions or comments? Councillor Bray?
Just a quick question. Nathan, you referenced the Community Hub Needs Assessment. Is that something we're doing with a consulting group, or is that just an internal process?
That was a process that wrapped up, I think, in March by FORAC. And there was a significant amount of public consultation that went into that. And
Was that the SurveyMonkey questionnaire?
yeah, and that now has resulted in, I think, a committee of council, as Councillor Smith mentioned, that is looking after that aspect of the downtown development master planning process.
But more than a SurveyMonkey survey,
Yeah,
there's a
no.
lot of consultation involved in that, a lot of planning and work behind that with staff, correct?
Yeah, our economic development director and our facilities director did a significant amount of consultation with all of the user groups that would potentially be a part of that community hub, and consulted them on what their needs would be and that sort of thing. And that's what led into the discussion and the council decision, I think, to follow a campus-style model for a community hub in the downtown.
And led to several of the folks that are on that hub steering committee now, right? Being pointed to that from those organizations. Councillor?
Then just one more question. Things like whether it's a single pad or a double pad, have those decisions been made? Because probably people on that committee are still asking me, we need a double pad, why are we planning for a single pad? So I'm just...
On what committee,
if that's
Councillor?
the needs assessment, if that's what we're calling our needs assessment, it's not the usual type of document I have seen in the past. So if we've decided that we're going to be building 2 ice pads but only freezing 1, how do we determine when and where we get to?
So just for clarification, what committee is asking you that question, Councillor?
These are residents that are asking,
Oh, so
some
not the
of which
committee, but
sit
residents.
on
Gotcha.
the
Okay.
Community Hub needs assessment or
Okay.
assessment committee.
Do you want to respond to that, Nathan?
Yeah, from what I understand, that the design and the decision making about what uses and what what facilities are within that community hub is part of that separate process, and it's being led by our director of facilities, and also through that council of committee for the community hub. So it's a separate but related issue to this process. This process looks to establish land use throughout the downtown, and it identifies a community hub in the vicinity of Main and Beck as a desirable piece of our downtown. So I don't know the particulars.
So it doesn't define what's in the community hub?
No,
Okay.
no, it doesn't at all.
Thank you.
Mr. C, I'm going to look to you for some clarification for the public here with respect to that in the Downtown Hub Steering Committee. Do you want to speak to that briefly?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just briefly, what is proposed is a twin pad and the infrastructure for a twin pad, and it's proposed that one ice surface be in year-round, similar to what Wasaga Stars Arena, and the other side would be indoor recreation space until such time as the demand for ice is such that it's necessary to put the second ice pad in. So the second ice pad would be, all the infrastructure would be there. We'd just be putting the boards in, the players' benches, the penalty box, and that would be it. So there is formulas that are used by recreation facility people that look at ice usage, making sure that all the available ice is used, and my understanding is that we are still, as a community, a ways away from using all the typical ice that would be available in a municipal facility at the Wasaga Stars Arena. So we have some time to go before there would be a significant demand for the second pad, and that's the information I have based on from a facility professional standpoint. Our director of recreation facilities and events would be able to give you a more detailed explanation.
Thank you, George. Councillor Belanger?
Our CEO answered, most of the questions, but I think the point is that activation could happen extremely quickly when demand got up, and of many of the locations that have been visited so far, it was quite common that with twin pads that the ice was not maintained in both pads year round, that it gave them a lot of flexibility. So.
All right, any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we have a motion here moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Stockwell, that Committee of Whole recommend that Council adopt the proposed official plan amendment to enact and pass the zoning bylaw amendment for downtown Wasaga Beach, and that Committee of the Whole of Council recommend to Council to approve the downtown Wasaga Beach urban design guidelines. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. With the motion having been read, we'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bartolci?
In favor?
Councillor Gray?
In favor?
Councillor Ego?
In favor.
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Thank you. And moving on to item 5B, the Director of Finance and Treasurer's report dated June 19th, Information Technology Managed Services. Madam Treasurer, join us, please. Welcome. The floor is yours.
So what's before you presently is a proposal for some additional managed services for computer support. The nature of this contract is to provide additional resources to the existing team, and they will help with monitoring of the network and the servers and the workstations, as well as maintaining our backups. They will help with some help desk functions, but not as much of the help desk functions as the other items. There'll be security monitoring. They provide alerts to us. They will do content filtering and make sure that we're in compliance with our policy. They will assist with planning and best practices and technology for planning for future. So this is a service that many organizations have looked at. It's not an inexpensive service to acquire, but it does really complement an existing IT department and would provide us with a lot of the services probably that we need in terms of managing risk and ensuring that the facilities that we have in place for IT meet all of our needs and requirements going forward. So I put that information there. The proposal is attached. At this time, we need to have further discussions with the provider to look a little more closely at the contract. But in the essence of time and the risk management, not wanting to let this go too much longer, I brought it forward at this time because I think there's enough information there to have a sense of what we're requesting. And I'd be pleased to answer any questions if anyone had any questions about what's in front of you.
Thank you very much. Jocelyn, questions for the Treasurer? Councillor Stockwell?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So it's really a contracting out thing that we're talking about.
Through your worship. It is in the sense that we were looking for additional resources in IT. So as opposed to looking to bring those resources in internally, we're looking to use outside services and contract with them to help support that system.
So it's going to be 6 to 1 and a half than the other. Or why would we not just approach it on the basis of contracting out the entire service?
Through your worship, they don't provide all the services that are needed for the IT. They don't provide the on-site service that is required, the day-to-day operations of IT. They only provide those services that they can manage externally from a remote location through the network. So they're not on-site here dealing with the user base.
But there must be companies that do provide.
Through your worship, to the best of my knowledge, most of the companies I understand, they're managed services like this where they're managing what is off-site. They're not looking to manage the on-site day-to-day. I'm not familiar with those services.
Councillor Boulanger?
Thank you, Mayor. In my past life, I will tell you there are companies that provide on-site service as well. I don't know that that's dated by 4 or 5 years, but it may certainly be something to look at, the combination of costs of existing internal IT and subcontracting out versus contracting out entirely, or they're. And I'm not suggesting one is better than the other. I'm just saying we should have a good understanding of the cost variables between.
And if I may respond to that, that is one of the reasons why we're suggesting that for this next short-term period, let's keep our continuity and get on top of the situation we've just come through, but with the understanding that in 6 months to a year, we want to be going out for an RFP when we have a better understanding of exactly what are the types of services that we should be requesting for this organization. So that's part of why we're approaching it under this strategy.
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
Thank you. Actually, Jocelyn just said what I was going to bring forward that was in the report, so I support it as is.
Other questions or comments? Seeing none, Madam Treasurer, I have a couple of questions. I'm looking at the cost of $8,500 a month, which is about $104,000 a year, which is essentially a full-time employee at this level. I understand why we're looking at going out for those specialized services. I guess my question is, we now have 2 full-time internal employees. Don't know what that exact dollar amount is, and I don't need that from you now, but if we're going out to these external services, do we still require 2 internal full-time employees?
So my response would be at this time, yes, I would respond that we do. If you recall during our last budget, we already recognized that we needed additional resources over the 2 staff that we had. So this is providing that additional resource that we didn't have before. I think also this provides us with that opportunity to assess that situation going forward. But until we actually experience this service and really see what they're able to manage for that cost versus what do we need in-house on site, I don't think we're in a position yet to quite answer that question.
Have we done any kind of survey or reached out to other communities our size to find out what their complement of staff is in IT?
I had not explored that fully. I was just starting to explore that last fall and had not finished pursuing it, so no, not at this time.
I think that would be good information for council to have as well. And then last but not least, you've indicated that this was an interim solution till we find out exactly what the requirements are for the organization. And so my question is, we do have a Chief Information Technology Officer that's been here for quite some time. Does he not know what the requirements are for this community at this time?
Through your worship, at this time, our assessment was that we need the resources that we have. And that we did need additional resources, which is why we came forward last fall. So without experiencing this service, I don't believe that we can change our assessment at this time.
So let me clarify my question, because it's not whether or not we need the service. I think it's pretty clear to us all now, if it wasn't before, we need the service. My question is, our current employee, our current Chief Information Technology Officer, is he not able to say, here's the services I think or I know that we require, and you know, based on that, we don't need time to figure this out, because I'm hearing you need 6 months to a year to try and figure that out, to assess that. I'm surprised, quite frankly, that our employee here today doesn't already know that information.
So these are new services that we have not considered in the past. And so when our assessments up until this time have been based on the current structure. Looking at the new structure, our information manager has not had the opportunity, given all that we've been busy with over the past month, to consider these services and how they might integrate and impact our existing resource needs. So again, I would have to respond with, I really think we need this opportunity to assess things a little further, because we're changing the way that we've been doing business.
So I want to be clear, I support doing this. Don't take me wrong, I support moving this forward and doing what's required so as that this doesn't happen again. I just, I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Okay, Councillor?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I pick up where you left off. I just don't know if this accomplishes what we obviously have to accomplish, other than or leave ourselves vulnerable again to some kind of a hijacking. And I'd like to hear from staff or somebody who could give me a confirmation that it will accomplish that. I mean, if it's that we don't know, then let's take the time now instead of 6 months from now to know.
Well, I think what we're hearing, Councillor, I'll let the treasurer speak to this, but I think what we're hearing is that we have a very good idea of what we need to do to ensure this doesn't happen again, and that's why they're recommending this service in the interim until we have that firm and solid and we know completely what's required before we make a decision as to whether or not we're going to move forward full-time with this or bring it in-house or out of house or whatever.
And my question is, are we safe in the interim?
Okay, Madam Treasurer?
And yes, my answer would be we are safe in the interim. We have taken those steps that are necessary with the multiple security levels. So we have the backups off-site that we needed. That's the #1 protection that we need against the virus occurring. We can't guarantee that that virus will not get on the system again. But should it get on the system again, we do have the off-site backups. We just went through a process this morning that worked very well, that demonstrated to us how quickly we'd be able to spin up a drive and be able to be operational while we cleaned our existing network if we were hit with a virus again. So we are in far better position than we were previously. And I have no doubt that we have taken the right steps to protect us.
All right. Last question, and then we're going to move on, councillors.
Just my last question is the $8,500 a month, is it a minimum 6-month contract, or is it, if we were to determine through analysis or whatever in 4 months or 3 months that we could terminate? Is it month by month, or do we have to sign up for 6 months?
So the way they structured this pricing is the $8,500 a month is based on if we sign for 2 years. If we sign for 1 year, it would be $126,000 a year versus if you sign for 2 years, it's $102,000 a year. There is a period in there, 90 days, I believe, of an assessment period where both parties determine whether or not this contract is going to be feasible to continue with, and you can opt out of it after that, within that time period. Those are some of the things that we need to talk further with about the contract with the organization, which is why we still have some communications that need to go back and forth while we determine exactly how this contract will be structured. There's enough information here to understand what services are being offered, at what price, and then from us to be able to go and establish exactly what that contract would look like. But I'm looking at something between 6 months and a year is where I would like to land with the services.
Sorry, Councillor Ray, the CEO just brought to my attention you had your hand up. I didn't see you. I apologize for that, so go ahead.
Thank you. Just my comment, I do support the managed services. I think last fall, the IT director brought forward a very comprehensive report explaining why he needed staff. The decision was made at this table not to provide additional staff. You know, things have happened that have now changed that, so I think we need to kind of catch up and determine if maybe that request last year was a fair request and we overlooked it because we were looking at other things in the budget. So I think we kind of owe it to that department to say, yeah, what would happen if they had a full complement? I think they were short-staffed all year. The report last year certainly demonstrated that to me because I did support his request, but that there wasn't enough support at the table to pass it. So I'm pleased to see that your suggestion is not to do anything rash and quick, and to actually fairly evaluate where we are and how we move forward.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll make one last comment and then we're moving on. At the end of the day, Madam Treasurer, had we simply been backing up properly off-site in a secured site, we wouldn't have been in this situation. We could have got a virus, we could have had a ransomware, but we would have been able to simply fire up our systems like other communities can do and the county can do and move on. Is that not accurate?
I would say that statement is accurate. May I add something to it?
You may.
We weren't the only municipality functioning under that same scenario. I was informed by multiple sources that the standard wasn't exactly that within the municipalities, and that's all I'd like to add to that. But yes, correct. If we have that.
Thank you. All right, it's moved by Councillor Stockwell, second by Councillor Smith, that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that it receive the Treasurer's report on information technology, and further that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that the CAO and the Mayor be authorized to enter into an agreement to provide IT management services. Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The motion having been read, we'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Bacolji?
In favor?
Councillor Briggs?
In favor?
Councillor Eagle?
In favor?
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
All right, moving on to item 5C, the CAO's report dated June 19th. Review on payment per diems and members of council for attendance at conferences and seminars. Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Worship. In your agenda package is a brief report that I was asked to prepare, and basically it looks at per diems that are paid to members of council who attend conferences on behalf of the municipality. There were 11 municipalities surveyed, and of the 11, 10 pay a per diem of some sort. One does not. The information is in the report in terms of the range. It ranges from $176 down to $25 per day for the various per diems. Wasaga Beach's current per diem is $120 per day upon request. So the average of those that pay is about $118. So I conclude the report by saying that this information should be considered and perhaps considered as part of an overall review of the policy, because it is a dated policy. I was only asked to look at the specific section, but I think the whole policy really should be updated. And Your Worship, I'll just leave it at that and answer any questions that members of the council may have.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Questions or comments? Councillor Stockwell?
Yeah, picking up on the comments of the CAO, if we look at the unfinished business, item B, it says Councillor Stockwell notice the motion review of the council conference, convention, and seminar attendance policy as it pertains to the payment of per diem to members of council who choose to claim a per diem when attending a conference, and that is not before us, correct?
Mr. CAO?
Yes, I believe that is before you, Councillor. This is the per diems that per diem rate that members of council claim.
Okay, so if when we deal with this today, that item is going to come off the unfinished business.
Correct.
Okay, then I'd like to speak.
Go ahead, Councillor.
All right, the reason I voiced my opinion as to what I thought was the unfairness of this policy goes back to a report that we had back in March, the annual report that we get pertaining to the remunerations of council. Now, in the makeup of the remunerations of council is this business of going on conventions and the cost of those conventions. But there's one difference, and that is that if by chance you work outside of your council hours, it makes you eligible to apply for a reimbursement while you go away. I guess the idea is that if you're running your own business, you don't miss a paycheck, but it costs you money to bring somebody in while you're out doing a conference. As it works out, and I thought this was not fair, was as it worked out in the report that we received back in March. It showed that 5 members of council under remunerations were all paid the same, $21,068.57. One was paid $22,508.57, and that has occurred every year of this council, 4 years of this council, and will occur this year as well. I just think that councillors who are doing basically the same job should be paid the same amount of money. And I also think that if you're in business for yourself, or if you're employed and you decide to run for council, you know very well that it's going to take you away from your business. And it's your call whether you want to give that up and to give up public service. God knows that you can't make a living off of what councillors are being paid. In fact, with the minimum wage going up to $15, I think we would be well under that amount. So I'm not talking about salary. I'm talking about the way you're treated when you go on a convention. And it would just seem to me that we should all be receiving the same amount. I think it's up to the individual if they have a business, as to whether they want to give that up. From time to time, I know many councillors that I have served with in the past, they have thriving businesses, still find time to do it without extra remuneration. So if I receive this report as given, then the matter doesn't change. So I'd like to put in a motion to say that that clause in our policy is taken out, so that every member of council is treated the same way, and every member of council receive the same type of reimbursement for their services. Now, Mr. Mayor, the CAO is the wordsmith at this table, and I think he knows what I'm trying to accomplish, and maybe he could put something on paper to accommodate that, so that I would move it and hopefully get a seconder to put it forward.
So you're looking to make an amendment to this as it's read to us today, Councillor, or you're looking to move a new motion?
No, I'm looking to make an amendment to take away that clause that says, just because you have a business or go to business, and when you go to a convention, you should get more than those of us who are giving full-time.
So, Councillor, what if you don't own a business but you have a full-time job?
Same thing.
Same thing?
I would assume that would make you eligible for compensation.
All right, so you're looking for an amendment to the motion. You'll need someone to second that, correct, Mr. Clerk?
Just a question for clarity.
Need a seconder.
Okay, so seconded by Councillor Ego, and now a question of clarity,
Question
Councillor
of
Bray.
clarity. In 2016, that policy was before us, and we made an amendment to include the payment for a portion of specialized adult care expenses. Are you asking to have them removed too?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Worship. I was just going to say, last year and this year, I have not claimed that, and I no longer expect to be claiming that.
All right. Well, the CEO is wordsmithing. Any other questions or comments? All right.
Oh,
Councillor Smith?
so just further to that, I know we're talking at conference expenses and what have you. What came up in mind was, I guess it's another part of the policy that CL is referring to, but I think mileage and attendance at other meetings in Collingwood or whatever, some are claiming mileage, some aren't claiming mileage, and I think we need to find I need to look at that again and just see how that works.
Well, I think, Councillor, that's, you know, we're this far along in this council. I think that is something we can discuss that, not today.
No.
It's not on the agenda. So we can get that on the agenda and have that discussion, or you could leave it for the next council. I prefer, if you want to discuss it, get it on an agenda and let's discuss it. Listen, members of council incur expenses. There's no doubt about it. And whether you claim them or you don't is entirely up to you. I can tell you that, you know, I think many communities, and I'll look to the CAO for this, the per diem is given to everybody. So if you go away, everybody gets a per diem. I think maybe that's the difference between us and maybe most municipalities, I'm not sure. So I would hate to see this council or any council do away with all claims related to expenses by members of council, because as the other member as council indicated, you're probably paid less than minimum wage for the amount of work you do, but you put your hand up to do it knowing what it pays, and it is what it is. But if you incur expenses outside of that, mileage, so on and so forth, I think that's for another day and a more in-depth discussion.
That was my point, Your Worship, was I believe our CAO said he had parts of that had to be cleaned up, and that's one area, and when it needs to be cleaned up, they can look at it.
When he looks at the policy as a
Yes.
whole. Okay. Councillor Bray?
So just a comment on per diem. My experience in the corporate world is if you were traveling on company business, you would be entitled to a per diem, and whether that covered your dog daycare, your child daycare, your taxi to the airport, it didn't really matter. It was to cover the expenses additional expenses, because you weren't going home to your own bed and your own fridge at night. Right now, it's in the policy. Anyone who may have claimed it or may not have claimed it, they did so within their legal rights to claim it. I think to remove it from the policy is probably a mistake. We're going into an election year. We don't know who's going to be applying, and I don't want in any way to discourage younger people that are starting out in their careers, they're gonna be taking vacation days to go away to conferences. Because maybe that was the initial intent, that they're gonna be taking a vacation day from a job. And I think it's quite short-sighted of this council to take that away from future potential councillors at this point, so close to an election.
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
Thank you. I've been on council 12 years. I've never asked for the extra per diem. I've never asked for gas to go into Collingwood. However, as Councillor Bray has said, in order to get quality people applying for this job, and it is a job, I think you need to keep this in. And for us to just sit here today and wipe a piece of it out, I think you need the whole policy before you. So for that reason, I won't be supporting it. If I would support the entire policy coming forward to be reviewed, but to just start wiping one thing at a time, I don't think that's the way to go.
Councillor Stockwell?
Mr. Mayor, I would bring it to the attention of council that I've been on this for 3 years. And every time I bring it up, we put it off, we put it off. We now have it before us. And now is the time to make the decision. And you know, we talk about transparency. That's a buzzword today in politics. Everything has to be transparent, above board. If you got five or six members of council serving, doing the same job, they should be paid the same amount of money.
So, Councillor, would you say instead of taking out, you put it in, and it's just as many other communities, it's a per diem paid to everybody?
If that's what you want to do, at least it's fair.
So your point, I just want to be clear on this, is that it's fairness.
It's
if
fairness.
It's fair for one, it should be fair for all.
Should be all.
Okay.
Now, and I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting we take it out.
Sorry, Councillor Bray?
Mayor Smith, I think back in 2016 when we were discussing making the other exception that we did, my point then was I've always worked in an environment where anyone who traveled was entitled to it. I believe that that was the policy. It obviously isn't here, but maybe it should be. You can claim it whether you want to or not. That's your personal decision. But I think in terms of attracting people to this job, I don't think we should be taking it out at the last minute as a form of punishment or a form of embarrassment or why ever this was brought forward.
Mr. Mayor, I have to respond to that.
Go ahead, Councillor.
I'm not looking to punish anybody. When you read the report from the CAO, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs down, it says members of council eligible for a per diem of 120 per day upon request. Eligible for per diem. I guess that means you have to have an outside income that makes you eligible. Now that's the way I read it.
As it's written today.
As it's written today.
Well, we'll let the wordsmith finish wordsmithing, and then we'll ask him that question, Councillor.
Right.
All right. Councillor Belanger.
While we're waiting.
We don't want any silence.
And as we're talking about corporate world and making the comparisons, on another note, and this is just if we decide to bring the entire policy together, is given the hours we work and what we get paid and everything else, to go to a conference and have a single alcoholic beverage refused from expenses seems rather harsh to me, and certainly in the corporate world that's not the case at all. I certainly would agree and have in my past life limited the consumption of alcoholic beverages related to expenses, but I just thought the first time I went I had one beverage, and when I turned in my expenses I was politely told that no, you can't claim that one beverage, so something to consider about.
Councillor, I would say I agree with the alcohol clause. I mean, you got to have food to live. Yeah. Although being a politician, you might think you need more alcohol to live, but you don't.
I have lemonade in mine.
Are you almost ready, Mr. CEO? Because if not, the questions will keep coming.
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
So just to respond to the question that Councillor Bray raised, or sorry, I think it was Councillor Stockwell. It has to do with the policy talks about how members of council are eligible to attend a conference, a single conference, and up to 2 seminars paid for by the municipality. So I think the eligible pertains to that. If you read, if a member of council attends a conference, attends a seminar, they are eligible to receive that per diem. So it's tied to attendance at a conference or a seminar.
So one of the questions asked, Mr. CEO, was do most municipalities just assign a per diem? Are we unique to the majority of municipalities where they just assign a per diem if you attend, or are we with the majority where you have to ask for it or you don't get it?
If I may, I'm not familiar with every municipality's practices, but most municipalities offer a per diem, and it's up to the member of council to claim the per diem, as they would claim mileage, as they would claim any expenses that they may have related to that conference. So in our policy does not limit in terms of who the per diem is paid to. It says upon request. In my report, I outline that historically within the town of Wasaga Beach, it has not been uniform, but only those that were employed outside of being members of council applied. But there are several examples. The deputy mayor alluded to one. There were other members of council that were employed outside the municipality that never claimed a per diem. That was just the way they operated. So from the standpoint in terms of claim, it's upon request. We have a practice. If council directed that practice should change, then certainly staff are in the hands of council. I've outlined what the practice has been in the past.
So I guess to the question, though, in all fairness to all members of council, and I do not want to belabor this, if you have a full-time job or a part-time job, or you have your own business, you claim a per diem. If you're retired, can you claim that per diem?
On request, you could claim that per diem.
All right, so you don't have to give a reason, just request it.
If you go to a conference, attend a seminar, you are eligible for a per diem. You could claim a per diem.
Okay. Councillor Stockwell.
My only
Councillor
comment
Eagle.
is that makes it all the more ridiculous.
Councillor Eagle.
Yeah, is that retroactive? No, I'm sorry. When I don't understand, maybe you can explain it. If you go on a conference, you're paid $75 for your meals, or up to $75 for your meals and expenses for food. Is that not your per diem?
If I may, Your Worship, no, that's your expenses related to your meals. So the per diem is meant to partially cover lost income from you've left your place of employment or whatever, and you've attended a conference. That's outlined in the report. That's what it's intended for, and that's how the practice has been in the past.
So then to my question earlier, Mr. CEO, if you're retired, you're not going to lose any employment or any money. You really can't claim it. So that's where my point comes from on fairness to all, as to what the councillor was saying. Councillor Smith?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to say that when I requested the per diem to pay for adult care expenses, it took all of council to make that decision. So upon request isn't really upon request. You just can't go and say, I want the per diem. You have to have a reason. So that's
okay. All right, Mr. CAO, can you read your...
So the amendment, Your Worship, reads further that Committee of the Whole recommends that Council delete the paragraphs pertaining to the payment of per diems to members of Council that attend conferences, conventions, or seminar within the policy pertaining to such matters.
Comfortable with that, Councillor?
That's my motion, yes, sir.
Councillor Eagle?
Yes.
All right. You've heard the question, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Could you read it one more time? I'm
Certainly.
sorry.
Yeah, one more time, please, George.
Your Worship, sorry. Further, that Committee of the Whole recommends that Council delete the paragraphs pertaining to the payment of per diems to members of Council that attend conferences, conventions, or seminars within the policy pertaining to such matters.
All right, so you've heard that. I'll read the original motion first and then the amendment. The original motion is moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Deputy Mayor Byfolchi. The Committee of the Whole recommends to Council that it receive the Chief Administrative Officer's report on the review of the payment for per diems to members of Council for attendance at conferences and seminars. Madam Deputy Clerk. We have to read the amendment now, right?
Yeah. So that is amended.
That'll amend that. All right, this is now the amendment moved by Councillor Smith, Councillor Stockwell, seconded by Councillor Eagle. Review of the payment of per diems to members of council for attendance at conferences, seminars. Be it resolved that the recommendation now before Committee of the Whole be amended by inserting the following after the introductory paragraph. Further, that Committee of the Whole recommends that Council delete the paragraph pertaining to the payment of per diems to members of Council that attend conferences, conventions, or seminars within the policy pertaining to such matters. All right, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. With the motion having been read, we'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
Opposed.
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
Opposed.
Councillor Bray?
Opposed.
Councillor Eagle?
In favor.
Councillor Smith?
Opposed.
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Mayor Smith?
Opposed.
The vote is 2 in favor and 5 opposed. The motion is defeated.
So we go back to the main motion. Can I give that to you? Thank you. We've heard the main motion. Does anyone need me to read it again? Seeing none, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll call for the vote. Councillor Boulanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
In favor.
Councillor Bray?
In favor?
Councillor Eagle?
Opposed.
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
Opposed.
Mayor Smith?
In favor.
The vote is 5 in favor and 2 opposed. The motion is carried.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5D, report dated June 19th, the Marwood Golf and Country Club request for heritage designation. Mr. CAO.
Thank you, Worship. In your agenda package is a brief report with several attachments. At the May 22nd Committee of the Whole meeting, I was asked to obtain costs to undertake a heritage assessment of the Marwood Golf and Country Club by a Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals. And I was to bring back a report pertaining to the cost of undertaking such a report. Afterwards, I received a letter, which is enclosed in your package, from the solicitor for the developers of the Marwood Golf Course, indicating that they had undertaken an assessment from a Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals member, and we're including it with the letter. And so my focus then changed from going to get a price for a study to what it would cost to undertake a peer review of the study that the developers undertaken. In your package is a copy of the cultural assessment that was undertaken by ERA Architects, and they are a Canadian Association of Heritage professional firm. The individual that did the report is listed as a member. I have gone out and I've spoken to 2 heritage consultants to determine what the cost might be. One gave me a written proposal, and one indicated that pending the outcome of what council decided, that he would submit a proposal if council so chose to go that route. So to undertake a peer review of the study that's in your package would cost in the range of about $6,000 to $8,000, and that's the range. Now I indicate in the report, and members of council, you have the report that was undertaken by the professional land use planner that was in response to the designation request that was made to the Heritage Committee. That report recommended that the Marwood Golf and Country Club did not merit a heritage designation. And now we have the second report, more thorough report by ERA consultants that also recommend or indicate that the golf course does not have merit to be designated as a heritage property. So I just mention that because I think committee needs to be aware of that. You have 2 reports. I think if committee does decide to go with a peer review, basically they're determining whether the report by ERA consultants meets the standards of the industry to undertake such reports. When I did talk to the one consultant about this, they are familiar with ERA's work. The other consultant is familiar with as well, but the one that I spoke with indicated that they are familiar with their work and they do good work. But every project you have to look on an individual basis. The last thing I would mention in the report, I talk about how plant studies that are done by developers in support of development applications are typically paid for by the developer. So if you need a traffic study, you need a noise study, you need those type of studies, environmental studies, those are typically paid by the developer in support of their application. With respect to peer reviews, it's hit or miss whether they're actually paid for by the developer. The planning staff have indicated to me that they go to the developer and they make a request, and sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes the answer is no. In this particular case, the developer has contacted me and indicated that he feels that the report that's been submitted is sufficient, and that if council decides that a peer review is required, that he is not prepared to pay for that peer review. That would be something that council would have to pay for. So, Your Worship, I'll wrap up there and respond to any questions that members of council may have.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Questions or comments? Councillor Smith and then Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
Thank you. I believe we have enough information to go forward. I don't think we should be spending any more taxpayers' dollars on this. To me, I think there's more than what's before us. I think there's something going on behind the scenes that I just delays the project as far as I'm concerned. I respect both reports, and I say let's just get on with this.
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi.
Thank you. I've seen a lot of development applications come through this through development committee and council. I've been part of development myself, and I can tell you I've been asked to pay for peer reviews before. It's not uncommon, the cost of development. So, it might be a snake or a bird or stormwater management, traffic, whatever it might be. It is the developer's responsibility to prove that it is okay to move forward with a certain piece of it. To say that, that ERA, if I'm understanding, was presented to Aaron Barrellis, was it? Which is the developer's lawyer. So to me, I say we still need a third-party peer review of this done. This is a big issue in our town. It has been discussed for years and years about developing the golf course, and I think we have one shot to get it right. $6 grand to prove that that's the right decision, I don't think is asking too much.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Stockwell.
Mr. Mayor, I look at it the other way. I think it's throwing good money after bad. And it's our money, it's the taxpayers' money, it's the developers' money, it doesn't matter. I mean, this is almost bordering on the ridiculous. To have a golf course with the age of this golf course and saying it's a historical site. Not a historical site. In my mind, it's far from a historical site. So, Mr. Mayor, I think it's time we just get on with the development and forget about playing the games anymore.
All right, then. Councillor Bray.
Yeah, I'm not sure if our CEO is the right one to ask the question, so if not, I apologize. What's the risk if we don't do this? So we have a group of residents who obviously feel that it is of heritage value. We ourselves have put a heritage plaque on the facility. Now we have reports that say that it isn't. So if we don't do this peer review, have we done our due diligence, or is that part of us being 100% sure that we've done as much as we can to say, no, it isn't heritage, let's move forward? So I guess what's the risk of saying no to this?
Mr. CEO.
Well, that's a good question. From the standpoint in terms of from where I sit, I think you have 2 reports from 2 professionals that have gone through the report. I think the one by ERA consultants, I think it's a more robust report. but both of them have come to the same conclusion. I think if one of them wasn't that strong a conclusion, but both of them have come to the same conclusion, and they're both strong conclusions. So I think from the standpoint in terms of council, I think you've done what you needed to do. Certainly there were concerns raised the first time because that person was not a Canadian Association of Heritage Professional. They were a land use planner. So the second report is by that firm, and they've come to the same conclusion. They've used the criteria that is required under the provincial legislation in terms of evaluating the golf course, and they've come to the same conclusion. So, challenging question, and hopefully I've answered it.
Thank you. Mr. Councillor Eagle?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I agree. We've had 2 reports on this, and both reports come to the same conclusion. I don't think that we need to go any further on this, and I think it's just a tactic, another tactic that the residents are using to try and stop this development. We've been kicking this around now, I guess, for almost a year, and now we've got these 2 reports that say that, and I from the beginning never could see why it would ever be classified as a historical site. But anyways, here we are, and that's the way it is. But I'm going to support the recommendation.
All right, any other questions or comments? So that we don't have a recommendation here except to further the committee of the whole recommend to council that it provide direction to staff of the next steps and it wishes to take on this matter. So, Mr. CA, are you looking for direction to come directly from council at council, or is this something you're looking for here? I'm a little confused when I read that.
So, Your Worship, this is committee of the whole, so council is the one that provides the direction. So it would be a direction to, or recommendation to council that either you would like a peer review or you would not like a peer review. So that is basically what is before you today.
Okay, I'm going to read this and then I'm going to ask the question again, Mr. CEO. It's moved by Councillor Smith, second by Councillor Eagle, that committee of the whole recommend to council that I receive the Chief Administrative Officer's report on the cost to engage designated Canadian Association of Heritage Professional to undertake a peer review on the preliminary cultural value assessment of the Marlwood Golf and Country Club prepared by ERA Architects. And further, that committee of the whole recommend to council it provide direction to staff on the next step it wishes to take on this matter. So I guess my question is, if council says yes, recommend to go to a peer report, it's not clear here, in my opinion, that if we pass this today, you are going to go out and do a peer report. And it's not clear to me that if we don't pass this today, that this is a done issue. So I guess my question is, how do we get there one way or the other?
Your Worship, that would be an amendment to that recommendation based on the discussion that's taking place. You could ask for an amendment from the floor to that, and that would outline the direction that the committee has discussed. So that would be the way to move forward.
So do you understand where I'm coming from, Mr. CEO? It says we understand the cost now, but now what do we do? And that's where I find it's left open there. Councillor Stockwell?
I'll give you an amendment that we do not ask for a peer review.
So I'm going to second that amendment. Councillor Eagle? Questions or comments while the Deputy Clerk preparing that? Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Bishop. I was going to move the motion as well, but I think the direction to staff might be that we go to the next steps. So we've decided that there's no heritage designation, but we haven't given any action to go forward. And I think we need to go forward with the process on getting the property back in the hands of the developer to do what they need to do.
Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't think that the property is in jeopardy with respect to any of this. This was just going to be something that certainly the municipality would have had to take into consideration if it went down this path. But I don't think at this point, the development is actively under consideration. It's being reviewed by the planning department. This was just one other matter to be reviewed.
So as I understand that, Mr. CEO, that whole process will continue to move forward.
Correct.
All right. Did you have a question, Councillor Bray? You look like you have a question.
No, it was,
Okay. With the nine, that's right.
I do have a question.
Yeah, do it. Councillor Bray?
Is it fair to say that if the residents who believe that it is, they can on their own go and do a peer review?
I think I'll turn to the CEO, but it's their money. Do
So
what
it's
they like.
something we choose not to do, but if there's still belief that there is some heritage value to the property, then anybody who feels that there is can do that.
Yes, your worship, through to the councillor, yes, there's nothing saying.
I'm going to let you read that. Okay, good. Mr. CEO. All right, Madam Clerk, you can read that.
Thank you, Worship. So regarding the request for the heritage designation of Marlwood Golf Club, be it resolved that the recommendation now before Committee of the Whole be amended by inserting after the second paragraph, further that Committee of the Whole recommends that Council not proceed with engaging a designated Canadian Association of Heritage Professional to undertake a peer review of the preliminary cultural value assessment of the Marlwood Golf and Country Club.
Okay, Council, you've heard the question.
So we'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
In favor?
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi? Opposed. Councillor Bray?
Opposed?
Councillor Eagle?
In favor.
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor?
The vote is 5 in favor and 2 opposed. The motion is carried.
Thank you. So should that be as amended then? All right, so we go back to the original motion now as amended. Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Eagle, that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that it receive the Chief Administrative Officer's report on the cost to engage a designated Canadian Association of Heritage Professional to undertake a peer review of the preliminary cultural value assessment of Marlwood Golf and Country Club prepared by ERA Architects, and further that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council it provide direction to staff on the next steps it wishes to take on this matter as amended. Councillor Smith?
Thank you. This is my question I had before, is that we're approving for him to undertake a peer review, but by the amendment, we're telling him not to.
That's why it's an amendment, that's correct.
Yes, okay.
Deputy Clerk.
We'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger?
Okay, just so I'm clear, so an in favor is supporting the amendment.
That's correct.
In
As
favor.
amended.
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
Opposed.
Councillor Bray?
Opposed?
Councillor Eagle?
In favor.
Councillor Smith?
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell?
Favor.
Mayor Smith?
In favor?
The vote is 5 in favor and 2 opposed. The motion is carried.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 5E, Senior Municipal Law Enforcement Officer's Report, dated June 19th. Doug, welcome. The floor is yours.
Yeah.
So I prepared some revisions to the election sign bylaw. I do apologize, this should have come in a little more timely fashion. It's something I normally share with the clerk's office at election time, and so it's taken a little while to get this forward. Before I address any questions, I did want to point out I did notice that I had missed one section in a new proposed restriction, which is a separation distance for people's own signs of 100 meters, so that we try to limit the number of signs in the strip, and so that the report and the bylaw, the way it is drafted, talks about
only permitting one of your signs within 100 meters of your same sign on municipal property only. It doesn't have any effect on adjacent private property signs. But what I intended to do is only have that on one side of a particular street, so that you could have one on one side, one on the other, facing opposite directions of traffic, and on a particular street, the restrictions. So if you turn the corner and you're still within 100 meters of a sign, that's another street, it's another separation. Okay, so it was only meant to limit on a street on one side. So if you recall our last election along Main Street, we had a barrage of signs, hundreds of signs along one strip in there, and we're just trying to spread them out more. So this isn't a separation from anybody else's sign, just your own sign. So that every 100 meters, you're free to do it on both sides of the road. And when you turn the corner, it's a different street, you're free to do it there as well. If that makes sense. So that would be proposed. I'm going to bring that back as a change if accepted. Anything else that council might want to address? And the other change that I've heard some discussion about just as I walked in tonight was that the number of signs on a property for private property. In the past, our bylaw, our last bylaw had been written as two per candidate per property. Being that we had 17 candidates last election, I thought that might be a little excessive. I tried to envision how many I've ever seen on a property of different candidates, and generally I've seen a few of one candidate and no other candidates. So what I had proposed as a change for your consideration was that we limited it at 3 signs on a piece of private property. Those would be 4x4 signs. That's the standard that was in the last bylaw, and I haven't looked to change that for residential property. But if council feels that they want one sign for every potential seat, I just looked at deputy mayor, and a councillor that's where I came up with the number 3 and raised it. So I'll leave that up to yourselves to discuss.
All right, Councillor Stockwell.
A question through you to the director. How many employees is it going to take to pace off the number of signs? And how many employees have you got to do it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, probably not enough. Each election cycle, it does get really labor intensive. The difficulty is for us, we'd simply use aerial view. We just look to see where it is, and we go on the map, and we have map tools, so it's actually pretty simple for us to do distances. We wouldn't be measuring out anything. And we're looking at relative distances, not to the centimeter, unless somebody was really trying to play a game with us and there was a complaint. We spend more time with complaints of people don't have stickers on their signs on our property, or they've got too many signs. And to determine if somebody has too many signs, I literally have to track where signs are across the municipality on municipal property. We give out 25 stickers, or 20 stickers in the past for small signs. And it's pretty simple. If we find one that doesn't have a sticker on it, and it is either not permitted, or it falls within the rules that we've set for people whose yards aren't visible, they got a fence or a hedge, and they bring it just outside. But it is challenging, and all depending on the number of candidates. Some candidates choose to put up no signs, and some candidates choose to put up a lot of signs, and their supporters. So I've just simply proposed some changes based on history here that I thought might limit some of our sign pollution.
Councillor Stockwell and then Councillor Eagle.
That was I asked my questions.
I'm sorry, Councillor Belanger and then Councillor Eagle.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a clarification, when you said limiting 3 signs per property, you said 4x4. Now, I thought the normal size, the 4x4 is the larger sign, is it not?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No, in our previous bylaw, I have a copy of it here, on residential property, it was 4x4. On municipal property, so the one out on the municipal right-of-way, it was 3 feet by 4 feet. That was the maximum. Most people chose to have smaller bag signs, but they could have larger ones. Then we had a provision, which I have proposed to remove here, for 4x8 signs, so a full sheet of plywood.
is we allowed 5. So I changed to make the ones on municipal property for production when you're getting things made. If you want to use the bigger signs, then you could use the same sign on municipal property. So I've upped the ones on municipal property to 4x4 and eliminated the 4x8 signs and given additional 5 stickers. So from 20 small signs to 25. Overall, it actually increases the surface area by 42% on one side by doing that, but it'll clean it up and we won't have these gigantic signs.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor.
Just the second part, thank you, Mayor, is that I don't support restricting signs to 3 candidates. I believe our residents can vote for a mayor, a deputy mayor, and 5 councillors. And if they choose to demonstrate that in signage, what I would say that anything over 3 signs, they should not be able to duplicate any candidate, so that you limit it to a maximum of 7 signs.
All right, Councillor Ego?
That was pretty well my question. I don't think I could support 3 signs. If some resident on private property wants to support 5 people for council, I think they should be given that right. But I can see limiting it to something that the director would come up with. I mean, we can't have like we had last year. I mean, it was ridiculous in some places. But I do agree with that there should be some kind of quota on it.
Councillor Smith?
Thank you, Your Worship. I spent quite a bit of time talking to Laura and to Doug here about a couple of concerns I had. I just wanted to confirm that this is correct because I know you were trying to bring everything all together. So my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, is that buttons, clothing, anything else, literature, anything cannot happen until 80 days before the election. Is that correct? You said you wanted them all to go together.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So there's a couple different provisions that are tied to the 8-week sign restriction. So currently in our previous bylaw and in the proposed bylaw, the posting of signs for election purposes has been restricted to 8 weeks before the election, which I believe is August 27th or somewhere in that neighborhood. Before this bylaw and before the changes in provincial government, there was all kinds of other things that were out there advertising, which we weren't considering as signs, or it was hard to know whether they are. So those things now we've clarified in here. So buttons and T-shirts and those kind of things to deal with municipal properties. There's a restriction that they cannot be worn at any time on municipal property. People can cover them up. We have signs on our doors, but to keep the process clean and transparent, they wouldn't be permitted here or any of our facilities. Anytime during the election campaign, that's from start to finish, and started on registration day. The 8 weeks pertains to signage. There is a clause in here restricting retailers or third-party advertisers from producing these or selling these things or displaying these things publicly, except at private functions. So if somebody wants to wear a T-shirt at any time off of municipal property outside the 8 weeks, we can't restrict that. Those are people's freedom of expression and rights. However, we are proposing in here that if you go into a business, there should be an election sign either supplied by a candidate or by now the third-party advertisers that can register, displayed, or any materials or those kind of things in a retail setting displayed to the public. So that just stops the distribution of those until such times as the 8 weeks. And at the 8 weeks, it's kind of fair game. Again, that doesn't affect municipal property rules. It will not be allowed on municipal property. And we've also clarified things like vehicle wraps and stuff like that have a political message, not other type things.
And I just have one further one is the use of the Recplex municipal facilities. unless something's included as a private rental. My concern about that may seem petty, but I think some people will understand that if somebody arrives in their car and they're going into the building, they've probably got a t-shirt or something else on, and how do we restrict them from going from their car to the building? And how do we stop people from standing outside the building in a group having a smoke or whatever else they're doing with their election material on? I think, in my mind, I would like to remove the private rental completely, and it cleans everything up. There's just nothing allowed on any municipal property, period. So that's one amendment I would like to make. If we're putting this forth as a motion, I would like to amend that, to remove that.
So you'd like to move an amendment on that, Councillor,
Yes.
to remove the use of public or of town facilities?
Yeah, and so that would, it eliminates the private rental. So there's no private rentals. So in that section E, policy provisions, it says do not use municipal facilities as defined in the election advertising and sign bylaw owned or leased by the town, including libraries and recreation facilities, for any election-related purposes unless rented in accordance with the town's rental procedures as a private rental. So I would like to remove that unless rented in accordance with the town's rental procedures as a private rental. And then the rest can carry on.
So do you have a seconder for that, Councillor? I thought Doug was going to put his hand up for a second.
Yeah, so that means nobody can walk from their car, hang around outside with their t-shirts on or whatever they are. So I thought I did have a seconder for that, but.
Sure, I'll second it.
All right, so Councillor, I'm going to have you say one more time what it is you require, so
Okay.
that the deputy clerk and
Okay.
the CAO is listening intently, understands it, and then we'll take some more questions.
All right, policy provisions 1D. 1D.
D as in dog?
I'm sorry,
Is there a page
1E.
Excuse me, Councillor, is there a page reference there?
Page 2.
1E. Did I hear a point of privilege or?
Yeah,
Councillor?
privilege. There's going to be many amendments to this. Are we going to address them one at a time by an amendment, or should we talk about all the changes we'd like to see?
Good point. Any thoughts on that?
Because there's
Doug, how you
certainly
would prefer
questions
to
about
see
the
that?
number of signs, there's questions about the size of signs, the location. So rather than just talking about one aspect, I think we should probably talk about all of them.
So put them all together and then we'll have to vote on them individual probably, but, okay, are you comfortable with that, Councillor? So you've got that issue, someone's making notes of these issues. Mr. CAO?
Thank you. The page and paragraph that Councillor Smith has quoted is dealing with the policy,
Yeah.
which is the next item on the agenda.
Yes.
So
Yes, I know.
perhaps Your Worship, she could hold that for when we get to the discussion about that. The subject matter right now is the sign bylaw.
Okay, so that's the
Rather
next item on the agenda, Councillor. Just hold that thought and remind us of it then.
But I was about to say, Your Worship, I think there are provisions in the sign bylaw that pertain to signage at municipal facilities. So it's more that principle, I think, is what the councillor is getting at.
Doug?
If I could, Your Worship, just to clarify, from that section to deal with election signs on public property, at 4.1 of the proposed bylaw, it says, except where existing policy permits. So if you were to pass this as that section is right now, and you decided to change the policy now or later to permit or not permit, then this would only apply, these restrictions would only apply if there's a policy that permits it. To your point about clothing, in 4.1.2, right at the bottom of page 8, where it's open to the public, exterior areas, lot entrances, no person shall wear or display any button, pin, clothing, or other item that has a political message. So we are looking to address people who would leave a facility or leave a group gathering. So they basically have to cover up or take things off. We've also included that separate washroom facilities must be included so that the public wouldn't intermix with the people that have private functions. So we're just basically providing the footing if you want to permit those kind of things in the future. The tool is here and it's all subject to policy. So I just respectfully, if this is
at some point might be considered down the road, then it could be left without any amendments the way it is.
Okay, I'm going to make a comment at this point for council here. You know, you've heard me say this before. I don't see any point in us creating bylaws or policy that we can't enforce, or that is going to make it so onerous on staff to enforce it that it just doesn't make any sense. And so, you know, we can sit here tonight, ladies and gentlemen, till the cows come home, and we can talk about you gotta put that button on in this washroom in this building between this time and this time, and when someone catches someone not doing that, they're gonna call Doug at home in bed because we're gonna hand out his home phone number, and Doug's gonna have to get out and come down. Folks, we live in a free and democratic society, and although I understand there needs to be rules and policies in place, and I think we have several. And I think we've talked this evening already, and I think we need to come back to some of them. But we can create all the rules and policies in the world, and if they can't be enforced, then they really don't matter. So I don't want this committee to get bogged down in the weeds with nitpicking on little tiny things with respect to this or anything else for that matter. So I would ask that as we move forward through this, that you refrain to whatever you think is extremely important. And if you think this is extremely important, no disrespect to you, Councillor Smith,
okay.
but if you think this is extremely important, then I get it. But I really struggle to see, I understand your concern, but I'm struggling to see how we would enforce that. And you know, now we're going to tell somebody, if you've got a t-shirt on, you've got to use washroom B95832 in building XYK95. I don't know how we're going to do
Well,
that.
my point to solve that, Your Worship, was just to not allow any private rentals, and then you don't have to worry about it. That solves one problem.
So I guess the issue I have with that is now we restrict us from making dollars and cents for the taxpayers on a rental of
I know.
halls. I know what you're saying. I've rented a hall in the past, but I think if someone's paying rent for that hall, I think it then becomes a private function in a public building. And yes, we don't want, you know, a dance group out there on the front lawn for 4 hours while whatever's going on inside. I get it. The bylaw says no, you can't do that. But once they're in the facility and they're in the function, I don't want to have to be paying bylaw officers to be there to enforce, you know, whether someone goes in the wrong washroom with the wrong button and the wrong t-shirt at the wrong time with the wrong person. Okay, Councillor Bray.
Thank you. Just kind of further to the t-shirts, the buttons. The library board was discussing this issue this week because a patron came into the library wearing a t-shirt. On the door is an orange sign that says, well, you can't wear a t-shirt. So does she take it off at the door and walk in shirtless? You know, if somebody comes into town hall to pay taxes, do we say we can't take your money until you go home and change? So I think we need to look at how to enforce it. We can put the sign up, but are we going to have our reception now saying, oh, no, I don't like what you're wearing, you have to go change before I...
Well, I think, Councillor, that one's, I disagree, I'm sorry. I think that's pretty simple. This is pertaining to politically...
No, but it was a t-shirt
shirts.
she was wearing that had a political message on it.
And if the sign on the door says no political messaging,
Yeah.
then I think that's a no-brainer for me.
But are our staff trained to say, I'm sorry, I can't take your taxes today because you're wearing a shirt that is not allowed in this building?
So that's a good question. Are staff or will staff be trained in the very near future to deal with that, Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, so awareness training, I think some of that's already taking place with staff, but we'll make sure that more of that takes place so that everybody's aware. And with a t-shirt, as I understand, a t-shirt can easily be reversed so that the display is on the inside, so to speak. So there is a remedy there with the t-shirt, and so from that standpoint, I think it can be addressed.
And does that get reversed in which washroom?
I know, in the parking lot.
I'm not trying to make light of it, but Councillor Smith?
Whatever we decide, Your Worship, I think I suggested to somebody that we need to get a communication out to the public, so before they get here, they know. So, and I think we need to do that sooner rather than later.
All right. Other issues or concerns with respect to what's been put before us, Councillor Stockwell?
Mr. Mayor, many years ago, I got into the campaigning business. Many years ago. And I've gone through dozens and dozens and dozens of campaigns. I've come to the conclusion, for an 8-week period, government should step back and let the people do their thing. And let the people that are running do their thing. To me, I ran only once in this municipality, didn't put up a sign. And lo and behold, I got elected. Isn't that a surprise? So, you know, it's not the signs, it's not the brochures, it's just using some common sense. And I think the less we have to do with telling people what they can't do, and use some basic common sense, okay, but leave it at that. Don't go have our people figuring out how many signs are in a strip and, you know, what's the size of this. Using public facilities, where do you think the all candidates meeting is going to take place? And what they can't give out brochures? I don't think so.
Well, I don't think the policy is
No,
saying they
no,
can't.
it doesn't.
It's clearly spelled out in the
Yeah.
policy on
Yeah.
that, Councillor.
So the least control we have, the better it is for the process. And I just think we get carried away on this stuff.
So, Mr. Bylaw, in the last campaign, was anyone bleeding from the ears? Were there any major issues that were of concern to you?
Mr. Mayor, the biggest complaint was people had too many signs, that they didn't have stickers on them, and the sign pollution, the amount of signs. Other than that, like, I didn't have a property that had, 34 signs on one residential lot. Sometimes there's 2 or 3. That's all my recollections. We never dealt with complaints on private property. It was always the public area. Some municipalities prohibit them on public area, and then they just get rid of that problem. We've chosen to permit them there. So I just tried to put some common sense provisions that make it pretty simple to spread things out more. And it probably won't look like Bayfield Street.
Councillor Bray, you had a question or comment?
Long time ago. Yeah, I mean, in all the rules in here, the only one that kind of offends me, or I think it kind of steps on people's rights, is the limiting to 3 signs per property. Because you're voting for 7 positions plus a school trustee, so 8. I think you should be able to express any one of those if you have a desire to.
And I would agree with that. I think that's a consensus around the table that we're hearing, so I think you're clear on that, Doug. I have any other comments before I make my final comments? I have some concern with the 100-meter rule. Again, I really don't know, Doug, how you're going to police that, or if you even have the time or the desire, quite frankly. So I mean, if there's a sign at every 20 meters or 30 meters, I just heard you say that, your complaints are that some people have too many signs, and I would venture to guess that maybe that's coming from somebody who had no signs, or very few signs, or maybe their sign is too big or too small, and I we have the restrictions there, and I get you've got to go out and deal with that, but I really struggle with you folks spending your time on trying to, is it 100 meters, is it 99, is it 50? Because my concern here, quite frankly, you get one complaint and you go out and you deal with that against a candidate, and now the candidate has 10 friends who now go out and complain to you about 10 other signs, and I mean, you just never stop. We see that with property standards and so on and so forth. So, I have no major issues with the report, except I agree with, I think, the majority here. We do not need to make this so cumbersome, and I think that people have the right to put, there's 7 members of council, and Councillor Bray brings up a very good point. There's also trustees. So if they need to have 9 signs, whatever that is, I have no problem allowing no more than the amount of positions. But I do have a problem with making sure that whatever that is, I think we're probably 11 positions. There's 4 boards in total, I think, 4 trustees that could be elected, or 10.
Do you get to vote for all, or just the one you support?
Just the one you support, yeah.
So it's only one.
So whatever that number is, 8 to 11, so be it. Was there anything else? Sorry, Doug, got 1 sec. Was there anything else that got brought up that you wanted to, anyone really was hard and fast on? Councillor Smith, you're hard and fast, okay. Doug?
Just to clarify, Your Worship, so I could certainly amend this bylaw as is to reflect on private property and commercial property, because the same rules apply to both, to allow voting for the number of positions on council. One, if I read this, I believe it's Councillor Eagle's comment, that one per person, so no more than one of the same sign. And I would just need direction as to how many other positions we're looking outside of council. So trustee for the school board, private school board.
No, I think you can only vote for one trustee and one board, so depending which board you support, so it'll be a total of 8.
8, that's what I was thinking, okay.
Now, if you find there's something else, then by all means.
What about third party?
Oh, third-party signage.
So this bylaw prohibits third-party signage on municipal property. It doesn't on private property, but if it's supplied by somebody other than the candidate, it would simply be a third-party sign. And we could simply have the 8 rule apply, 1 per candidate. Or one per position, no 2 repetitive. So if the candidates, a third party wants to put up a sign for a particular person, they could do it instead of the person doing it, or the candidate.
I'm good with that. I'm looking around the table.
So you can have a total of 8, and it could be 3 candidates and 3 third parties?
As long as the third parties are for 3 different people. You can't have more than one sign supporting one person. Am I understanding that correct, Doug?
Yeah.
Okay, then no, I don't.
The third party is just simply somebody who's putting up a sign on behalf of a candidate. They cannot be working with the candidate. It's an independent thing, and they're paying for that.
Deputy Mayor?
Or it could be
Yes,
about
no
a question on the ballot.
Or, sorry, a question.
So that's why I'm saying
Yeah.
you might need to go to 9 signs.
So if I could, then I will adjust it to say 1 for each position on council and 1 for a board. And if there's question on the ballot or questions, then 1 per question on the ballot. So we don't know how many ballot
Covered it
questions.
off.
There we
Okay.
go.
All right. Councillor Belanger?
Yeah, not to complicate it, but that common sense prevails. Is there are properties where a backyard or a riverfront could be a location for signs. So like, I mean, so if you have signs in the back that are not visible to the signs in the front, I'm thinking that should be considered like a second property. Like,
So a good example of that, I think, Doug, would be Downer, right? Where some of those properties front on Downer Crescent and some back onto River Road West.
So
Is it Downer? Yeah.
if we had 8 signs per property, people could choose where they want to put their signs. I would think it would literally, you're
Yeah.
now doubling the number of signs per private. We couldn't say you could and you couldn't. That would be very difficult.
That's a good point. You understand that, Councillor?
Yeah, I don't know if, I think the whole idea was to sign pollution, so all I'm saying is common sense. Like if somebody has a large property on the river and they're supporting someone for deputy mayor, they might want to put a sign at the front and at the back. And I don't personally have an issue with that.
And they could do that.
No,
They couldn't do
couldn't
that
have
because
two
it's
the
1
same
per.
candidate, one
Right.
per.
See what you do, Doug?
Can't work.
I just try to solve the things.
Yeah, you're doing a hell of a
Councillor
job.
Bray?
So then just, I could support a total number of signs if we decide 8 is the number or 10 is the number per property, but I don't think we should define what they are. So if it's a third party or a school trustee or a deputy mayor or whatever, I think we should have total number of signs. And then you have to just decide which are the most important 10 to you. So I would just like to see a total number. Yeah.
Okay.
So that number is 8? Unless it
Yeah, I mean,
number is 8?
I think that's fine.
You good with 8, folks? I'm seeing yes. 8 it is. All right. Councillor Smith?
Just a quick question to the deputy clerk. How many third-party applications have we received to date?
To your worship, none.
But it's your councillor.
Yes.
Well,
All right. Any other questions or comments for Doug? All right, I'll read the motion moved by Councillor Belanger, seconded by Councillor Ego. The Committee of the Whole does recommend to Council that it pass a new bylaw that regulates election advertising and the placement of election signs, and further that Committee of the Whole recommend to Council that it repeal the existing election sign bylaw number 2013-89. Now there's some questions within this, so I'm suggesting that this is probably going to have to be revised and brought back then, is that Deputy Mayor Byfolchi?
Why can't there just be an amendment to add the 8, to make that one change, and then we're done?
Can go to council.
The way I read it is that
Madam Deputy Clerk?
sorry, the way I read it is that council passed a new bylaw. It doesn't say this specific one before. So I mean, we're in agreement that the senior law enforcement officer is aware of the changes to be made, and then when we bring it forth to council this month, those changes will be exit. I'm okay with the if council's okay with, or committee, we can keep the motion and the.
All right, clear then, Doug, on the
Just
changes?
the bylaw, we can come forward with the amendments.
Great.
To the council.
Thank you. Madam Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. We'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger,
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi,
In favor?
Councillor Bray,
In favor?
Councillor Ego,
In favor.
Councillor Smith.
Point of order, do I not have a motion on the floor?
Well, that motion pertains to the next item
Okay.
on the agenda,
Thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you. In favor.
Councillor Stockwell,
Favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor.
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Thank you. And now moving on to item 5F, Deputy Clerk's report dated June 14th, respect to Town of Wasaga Beach policy number 1 to 5, use of corporate resources for election purposes. Can you speak to that, Madam Deputy Clerk?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of the policy update would be to reflect the changes in kind of in definition in conjunction with the sign bylaw. So basically, we're just clarifying the definition of public property. I know it was a little bit confusing before, and we've hopefully kind of ironed that out. But I'm aware that Councillor Smith may have a concern with in terms of the facility usage.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to that section. So what we've done now is refer it back to the bylaw the definition in the sign bylaw, whereas before it just said not to be used it. Now it says to go back to read the definition of public property, which Doug has then clarified out doesn't include, the commercial third-party leases and all that kind of stuff, and that it's in compliance with that bylaw. So it would address the being in the parking lot and taking off the shirts, or flipping the shirts inside out, buttons and all that kind of stuff, and the bathrooms.
I think I'm confused. You lost me with taking off shirts and putting it back on.
Well, your concern before had been, through your
Yes,
worship,
yes.
that people walking to and from or having a smoke
Yes.
or going to the bathroom. So in Mr. Vincent's updates, he advised that, or he addressed that, there was a clause in there to address the people out there, that it would be, it would be flipped inside out, or it wouldn't be on, but once they're in the private, in accordance with the private rental agreement in the room, then that's separate.
My concern was no private rentals. That was what I was.
So you want to put a motion forward,
Yes.
Councillor, that we omit private rentals for election purposes.
That's correct.
And you have a seconder for that?
Well, Ron,
No,
do you
I'm
want to
sorry,
help
I'll
with
remove it from that. I
Okay.
didn't think that's what it was. I thought it was to do with the t-shirts.
Okay.
So I'll withdraw that.
Okay.
Okay,
Councillor,
and just a comment on that, I don't see the Recplex or the other municipal facilities as corporate resources. I see them as municipal resources that should be accessible to all residents.
okay, so withdrawn that, problem solved. Any other questions or comments for Laura? Seeing none, I'll read the question. It is moved by Councillor Belanger, seconded by Councillor Smith. The Committee of the Whole received a report pertaining to review and update of corporate policy 1 to 5, use of corporate resources for election purposes policy. And further, that Committee of the Whole recommends to Council the adoption of the use of corporate resources for election purposes policy as presented, effective upon approval by Council. Deputy Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. With the motion having been read, we'll call for the vote. Councillor Belanger,
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Byfolchi,
In favor.
Councillor Bray,
In favor?
Councillor Ego,
In favor.
Councillor Smith,
In favor.
Councillor Stockwell,
Favor.
Mayor Smith.
In favor?
The vote is 7 in favor and 0 opposed. The motion is carried.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 6, items for future meetings. No new items. Under closed session, it's not required. Item 8, reports from closed session as required, not required. And this meeting is adjourned.
Good night. Good.
Sure.